Now we'll switch gears and go to a subject that seems to be a constant moving target for all of us. As you all know, compliance is very, very important. It can be very frustrating to understand where that target really is. With us today is our senior account manager, Chaz Butterfield, to talk to us about conquering compliance. Chaz, take it away.
Hey, I appreciate it, Bryce. Appreciate it. Thanks for the intro. So the last couple of years have been quite the roller coaster for us all. I'm sure you can all agree. COVID-19 pandemic has hit the world by storm, and it's caused a lot of changes in the way we do things. For example, back in 2020, the Tokyo Olympics, although postponed for an entire year, and even though there were plans to have stadiums half filled due to a surge in cases for the first time in modern Olympic history, there were no spectators at the event. Due to factory shutdown and rapid increase in the demand, shelves quickly emptied of masks, hand sanitizer, water bottles, and my favorite, toilet paper. You know, you're in a first world country when your biggest worry is if you're going to run out of toilet paper. All jokes aside, it's caused a lot of inflation and shortages that have not been seen so far this century. Vaccines have been created and shared across the world, which is great. Two new variants to COVID-19 have also unfortunately been created and shared throughout the world. 2 years ago, for you call centers, I'd imagine the majority of your businesses had your agents working from the office. And you guys had to go through the hard transition of getting those agents to work remotely. I'd imagine now that a lot of your agents are working from home, and you made that transition. You kept your business moving. In addition to the world events, the FCC and FDCPA have been busy. They've made some recent changes in the DCPA laws and in Reg F and several other regulation changes. Some of these changes include only allowing 7 attempts to an account in 7 days, only allowing 1 right party contact in 7 days without consent, the need for consent to send an email or an SMS. Consumers now can choose when and how they want to be contacted. In addition, several states have specific laws on when and how often they can be called when residing in that state. You can be held liable for calling somebody if you're calling the wrong number. A lot of these changes have caused a lot of hardships, and it makes things hard for us as businesses to run and maintain efficiency, to remain compliant as we all want to. The great Dolly Parton, it's actually her birthday today, so shout out to Dolly for her 75th birthday, said we cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails. So we can't control outside regulations and laws that pertain to our business, but we can make adjustments on how we react to those. TCN has spent thousands of development hours and thousands of dollars because we foresaw a lot of these compliance changes. So what they put together, as Jesse's mentioned in the past and Mike mentioned, is a compliance suite that is very easily deployable, scalable, and highly customizable. As a goal for TCN, we understand that remaining compliant is complex, but it's crucial. And because of this, TCN is offering our compliance suite to all our customers at no additional charge. So let's get started, and I'll show you our compliance suite, and we'll talk about it. So we'll go over, what is natural language, how to conquer Reg F, how to manage customer consent preferences, combining, like Mike mentioned really quickly, list management and using compliance. You can use TCN to scrub the re-sign number database, so you're not held liable if you call a wrong number and that number hadn't transitioned to somebody else since the last time you contacted them. And then I'll make sure I leave some time to answer any questions. All right, so what is compliance and how do we get there? TCN's new operator system has been created, and we now have apps. So you can see here all the different apps. Mike went over these. Natural language compliance is located right here. we have this cool little learning hat that will teach you about anything within Operator. And what it says about compliance is TCN's natural compliance allows contact centers to express complex compliance rules quickly and easily using natural language. So what does that mean? So if I wanted to create a new rule set for my account to ensure that I'm not calling people too much, too little, and when and where I'm supposed to call them, I hit create here and give it a name. Now you can have a specific rule set for, you have several lines of business. You can have a rule set for just that line of business. While having the one account, you can have several different rule sets. So I'm going to call this one ABC Company. Now by default, TCN has a scrub outbound calls against the default DNCL. So anything that we have in our do not call list, we're not going to call. Another rule that has deny outbound calls before 8 a.m. and after 9. Now this is going to look at both the zip code or postal code if it's turned on and the phone number and ensure that it's dialing in a time that exists within this window. Now beyond this, that we can get really personal and customizable. So for example, speaking to Reg F, if I wanted to make sure that I'm not calling anybody more than 7 times in a 7-day window, I can write a rule like this. And there you have it. This is going to look at the phone number and it's not going to allow more than 7 calls in a 7-day window. Now I can take that same rule because it's looking at the phone number and I can make it look at the account number as long as it's identified in the list. So I would just use the word using. You can tab over and it's intuitive, or you can type it in. So this rule here is going to look at both the account number and the phone and ensure that we are not calling anybody more than 7 times in a 7-day window. Oops. Now another rule, if we wanted to only ensure that we're calling a right party only 1 time in the 7-day window without consent, we can write a rule like this. Having result so you can say if it was connected via TCN call, so the call connected to an agent, or you could say having disposition and a value. So in TCN, you can have customizable responses, and you can make those responses have a frequency to them. So if you're selecting specific dispositions, you can limit the amount of times you're calling a consumer. You can do that by phone number, or you can be specific and say using account number. Some additional rules here. Let me go over these with you. You can get specific about the states you're calling into. So, for example, like states like Wisconsin or Washington, if you want to deny the attempts there, because it's going to be a little bit different, we can actually choose the state and just apply that to just the state itself. Close the bracket, put a period at the end. We can customize based on holidays. So if we want to deny calls on specific days, say December 25th. Or if you want to get specific, there's specific state holidays. So for example, back in Utah, we have a rule that we don't, if you wanted to add a rule not to call somebody on a random holiday of Pioneer Day, you can put that holiday in and make it just for Utah and nowhere else. The great part of these rules is you can set them, you don't have to worry about it because they will remain in effect indefinitely. So here's a good list of rules that I've created. If I want to save these rules, I can come down here and click save. Oops. So now it's telling me I had an error. So I can fix it and resave it. Oops. Oh, that's what it was on Utah. Once you've saved the rules, you can have multiple, as I mentioned. Some other things that you can do with compliance is you can have what we call scrub lists. So a lot of times we're having natural disasters or if there's a specific state you don't want to call, for example, you can add zip codes to a scrub list that will immediately be scrubbed. So to do that, you would just create a scrub list, call it whatever you'd like. Choose the content. Is it SMS? Is it a phone number or other? For this one, we're going to say other. You can put data in here if you'd like. We'll say zip code. And you save it. Now I have a scrub list. Now to add to that, there's several ways to do that. I can manually add it by clicking this plus button here, adding any data and even an expiration date if I want that to expire after a certain time. Say there was a hurricane in Houston and we didn't want to call Houston for 6 weeks. We could add all Houston postal codes and not call that for 6 weeks. So you can put the date of the expiration here, all of your content, you can copy it in. You could import a list, or you could put it in via SFTP or an API call. Okay, go back here. We can also test our rules out. So if we wanted to test to see if a rule set worked, you can create what's called scenarios. So you're not caught by surprise if a compliance rule didn't work. So with this, you can imitate the communication you want to make, the number you're calling to, or email, how many times you're hitting that number, and any additional information you want to put in there. The date and time you're putting it in as well. You can do a deny, so it should deny in this case, and it should allow in this case. Oops, I'm gonna put a valid phone number in there. And I hit save, and I've saved a rule set, or a scenario. Oops, forgot the country code here. There we go. I could then use this scenario against one of my lists to ensure that I'm remaining compliant in that test situation by hitting the run button here. Choose the rule set and click run. And it was successful. TCN also has a consent list and allows you to provide consent to your customers. So to do that, we can create.
Taz,
Go ahead.
I don't
Yeah.
mind if you don't mind, I might interrupt. And there's a few questions
Yeah,
coming
please.
in, and
Sure. Yeah, please.
before we get too far along the way. So if we have multiple numbers for the same account and have the account number in our outbound file, can the no more than 7 and 7 rule be applied regardless of number sent?
Great question. Great question. So if we come back here to compliance, this is where we would specify, and I usually have two rules. So I'll have one, if I don't specify if I'm using the account number or the phone number, it's going to default to the phone number. So that's why I have deny outbound calls more than 7 times in 7 days. And then I have an additional one that's going to look specifically at the account number. So if I had 3 or 4 or 5 different phone numbers tied to one account number, it's going to look at the account number and make sure that the account number itself hasn't been attempted more than 7 times in a 7-day window.
Perfect, thank you. And let
Yeah.
us know if that answered your question fully. And another question that came in is, where in TCN do I designate my agent disposition codes as right party for use in natural language compliant, like in example rule 6 that you set up, Chaz?
Perfect. Great question. So if we come here, responses are all customizable in TCN. So I can build them and make whatever values I'd like. So here you see right party contact. If I wanted to have a rule for wrong number, I have this response saved as wrong number. That's the value. Here's my key. If I save that, I could then come in here, like in rule 6, and I could put in so the value of the disposition can be anything you'd like. You just have to define it in the compliance rule sets. You want to make sure that value is exact. When I save it, if it's something that hasn't been used before, TCN will actually give you a pop-up saying, hey, this looks a little off. Are you sure you want to use this one, or do you need to go and double check the response that you added just to make sure the values line up?
Great, thank you. And then another question, and once again, if for whatever reason you have a follow-up to those questions he asked that want him to dive deeper into it, please feel free to ask. This question says, are rules standardized, or is there a sample of what Chaz is typing available, and do they have to be verbatim in terms of the way they are written?
So the best part about TCN's compliance suite is it's customizable to your business. And so you can make adjustments just as everybody has different responses and dispositions. Everybody can have slightly different compliance rules depending on the line of business they're calling to or from and other situations. TCN has a list of some generic Regulation F type rules that account managers can provide to their call centers per request. But nothing default is put in just because of that reason. We want to allow the customization for the client.
Okay, great. Great. There's a couple other questions, but I wanted to catch those right there at this point. When you're at that point, I'll let you go ahead, and then we'll pick up on some of the others as we continue. But thank you for your questions, and keep sending them in.
Yeah, keep them coming. Keep them coming. I appreciate the questions. All right, perfect. All right, so we went over so far what a rule set is, what scrub lists are and how they work, how to check against your rules to make sure they're doing what you want them to do. Now we have this consent option. So what consent does is it says, I'm going to take a list of account numbers and I'm going to tell TCN the numbers or accounts that can be called and what can't be called. So to create a new consent profile, you can just click this plus button here and you can name it anything you like. So ABC company phone numbers. Click save. Now I have this new consent entry here. Now you could, similar to a scrub list, a consent list does the opposite. It tells you or your business what times you can call a specific account or phone number and via what channels. Whereas a scrub list is just going to scrub out anything you have in there. So I can add an entry and I can say, it's a call from a phone, and here's my number. This is the key. And you can only call Chaz this month of January, for example. So we can call him the whole month, And we only want to call Chaz because Chaz works in the mornings until 5 p.m. Let's not call him before then. So we're going to block that out and allow calls from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night. And we're going to make a little note here. Works, call him in the evening. Okay, perfect. So you can see here we have this consent entry. Another way we can do that is via the agent. So as an agent, I'm taking phone calls. Reload this here because it's been a while since I was in. My agent page here.
Login successful.
I'm making a call to Chaz or to whoever. A couple compliance things that's really nice on the agent. We can add a zip code entry and require the agent to enter a zip code. We can require the agent to enter an account number and ensure. So TCN can scrub against that and ensure on manual calls as well that TCN's not over dialing an account. See, so this one's restricted because I can't dial that. I have it on a scrub list. If I dial another number here, put in the zip code, put in an account number. Oh, I actually have a rule in place that blocks anything. So I have a rule in place now, and I'll show you what this looks like here in just a sec. I forgot I put in there. That denies anything that I don't have in a consent list. So, oops. Sorry about that. I'm jumping around everywhere here. So I'm going to allow my number to be dialed here, not to expire. So if I make a call to Chaz now, and I have this consent form here, I can add a consent and I can say, okay, Chaz only wants to be called. So similar to what I showed you on the management side, when he wants to be called, how he wants to be called, an account number for this here as my key, and the reason for consent. Just click add here. It adds the consent entry, and it's added here so we know who we can call and when we can call them. For receiving consent for email or SMS, we have this option here where you can go to your consent rules, and you can copy a module here to embed either in your website or using TCNs to pass consent onto the customer. So the customer can actually go to that site and consent to be called or contacted via various channels and give consent for that. So here's just TCN's portal. Now they add their number to give consent to be called or texted or whatever communication method you'd like. Put in my email and an account number that's optional. And I can add my consent. And like mentioned, so you can also use the website here and copy an iframe into your own website for that consent option. Make it customizable for your clients. Let's see here. One of the great things about the compliance suite, and this is a compliance manager's dream, anytime a campaign is ran, we can come in here and we can see the rule set that was used. It has a unique rule set ID. If I click here, I'll see all the rules that were in that specific campaign. If a manager wants to know, has compliance concerns, they can always come in here and copy and paste what is used for their compliance rule sets and paste it really easily into an email. Or if you have lots of different accounts, you can copy and paste the same logic and share it across multiple accounts very easily. Let's see here. All right. Nope. Sorry about that. All right, so that's the compliance suite here. Here's another option here. So a lot of people are asking, well, how do I know how to make a rule when I'm building out compliance? This Tutor Hat does a lot of good things for you. So it's going to have information for you on how to create rule sets. And give you lots of information on how to do so. So your frequency, your holidays, how to do region type rules, etc. So there's lots of key information here using this Tutor Hat. So now if we go into LMS, so using compliance is great. There's a few things we can do here if I go to LMS. So Mike Borden really talked about the LMS tool and the power of this lead management service and data flow manager. We can do things like adding consent. So we can add or remove consent via SFTP or an upload and do that as frequently as you like. So if we click here on this node, this allows us to add consent and give us a consent list of entries. You can choose the profile you want to connect it to. So whether it's account number, phone number, etc. Optionally, you can add a start and end date or an expiration field. So that's how you can upload consent. Another option with compliance, you can import compliance scrub list. So if you quickly needed to add a big list of zip codes, for example, in the Houston case, if there's a hurricane or such, you could quickly add a scrub list of postal codes to scrub. I would just select zip codes here. And the account number is going to be the field that we're going to be scrubbing against, or the phone number, and an optional end date. So when are we allowed to call those zip codes again? We briefly mentioned this. So TCN scrubs with and is partnered or integrated with the RND, or the registered reassigned number data, the reassigned number database. How that works is you can take a list of your contacts, your phone numbers, and you can scrub against the RND. So you would just have the last contact date, whatever that field is on your contact list, and a phone number. And what this does is when you load it through, it will tell you either yes, no, or unknown. So yes, it's been reassigned. No, it has not been reassigned, or we don't know. So what that does when using the reassigned number database is it's going to give you safe harbor when calling a wrong number. So if you called someone's cell phone and said, hey, it's the wrong person, if they made a complaint against you, you could then show, well, hey, I scrubbed that number against the registered number database, and as of this date, it belonged to the person we had the last time we contacted them. You can then build out a full pipeline to then say, okay, anything that has not been reassigned, we're going to schedule in P3 and run a campaign. And anything that has been changed or has been reassigned, we're going to take that number and we're going to put it into an SFTP list, or we can then scrub those numbers and not call them or do what you will with them. Another great option on the frequency side. So using LMS with frequency. So we can take criteria here. We can say, okay, how often is this account number over the last 7 days been called with specific information with an answered link call or had a right party contact? We can say, okay, we want to take any of these numbers that have been dialed too much anyway, and we're just going to take them off our list and only dial that which is available to be called this specific day. What that allows you to do, compliance will cancel the calls if the compliance rules are in, but adding LMS and filtering out those lists by the frequency will just give you a clean list every day of all the stuff that you can call and leave out all the stuff that you can't. And you can add dispositions here. So I would say, here's my call detail. Once again, right party. I wanted to add another one. Call detail, number. I save that. I can then do a filter based on that query that I did previously. And I can say, well, let's include everything where the account number frequency is less than 1. So we don't want to call anybody when they've been dialed and connected to more than one time in a 7-day period. I can hit save. And I can put that same logic, that same 7 and 7 logic to remove any of those accounts and not dial those that day. So you can say, okay, we're going to call anybody that does. Anybody that doesn't, we're just going to leave off the list. And then check here. Here's what I have on my list. And then assigning, I forgot to mention, assigning a rule set to a manual call, and to an account. So we can have a default rule set. If we come in here to organization, and then I go to preferences here, and I go to campaign, and then compliance. So this is where we set this rule set up. We can have it set. We say display or use, and you can use. If it's set to use and not display, it's not going to show when you schedule. If you have multiple, you can choose what the default one should be should you forget to assign a rule set. And then it's assigned by clicking save here. On the agent side, because your agents are going to be making manual calls, if they do so, you can assign a rule set in the properties section here. So I go to agents and then Hunt Group Manager, and then to properties. I go to this manual dialing tab here. And here's where we can do lots of compliance things like scrub cell phones or use time zone restrictions. Require the agent to enter a zip code before making a call to ensure they're dialing in an area that they can call into. You can assign a rule set So you'll notice there's multiple rule sets. You can assign a rule set per a specific hunt group, and then that rule set will be self-maintaining just for that single hunt group. You can require the agent to enter things like an account number beforehand on manual calls. So TCN is not only looking at the phone number to ensure that's not being called too much, we're also looking at the account number as well. You can make that an optional add or a required entry for the agent. So that's on the manual call side. And then on the API side, you can also include the parameter of what rule set you'd like to use. Or if we come here into LMS and I go to a P3 exchange, this is where you would have the broadcast sent. You can choose a rule set here as well. And as long as it's set that way, it will remain that way going forward for as long as you have it. So let's see here. Let's see here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them at this point.
Chaz, I actually do have a few here lined up, so we'll jump on
perfect.
into them.
Thanks.
When you have a lot of rules in a campaign and a lot of accounts, say 50,000, does it lag or bog down the campaign? And does it build and process real time, or does it build and then start calling?
So great question. So it will pre-process. So before the call is made or queued up, it will scrub against that. So think of it like a big pipeline. So it's going to initially have all these calls in this pipeline and check to see if the rules pass or not. If they don't pass, it's just going to cancel it out, move to the next call. If they do, it's going to make the call go through. So there's not much of a lag or anything there.
Okay. And feel free to ask any follow-ups if you feel like your question wasn't completely answered in any of these. Can the consent records be exported from P3 as a report or automated report or via an API as of yet?
Great question. So if we go to consent here. So not yet. They can be queried, or you can download a list right from the site. So if I click download here, it will give me all of my consent entries. But via API and reports is not quite available quite yet. So.
Okay. Next question says, is the R&D scrub enabled as a default in LMS, or is that an additional service feature that needs to be enabled within each account?
So it is an additional service that needs to be enabled. You can contact your account manager, and they can help you get that set up. We do charge a fee for the R&D, and it's just a government fee that they pass on to us.
So we're passing that fee straight through, correct?
Straight through. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So how it works is you can buy a big list of entries you could scrub against. So TCN, because we're a large company, have pre-purchased those R&D scrubs, and so we'll get it to you at a much lower rate than if you were to go directly to that database.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chaz. Next question says, can you combine call and text attempts into one 7x7 deny rule?
So yeah, so TCN is working on the compliance as far as multiple channels. So you can see here in the language, if I say deny, you can say calls or SMS or emails. And that is a work in progress as far as combining everything into one. That's something the team's working on now. So.
Okay, and let's see, any other questions that, follow-up questions that we have? Let's see, here's one. Is there a way in natural language compliance to scrub calls against the scheduled callback list? If I have someone on the callback list for tomorrow and their account comes up today, I don't want to call that account today since they are scheduled for tomorrow. Did you follow that? Do you want me to repeat that, or did you grab that?
Yeah, maybe repeat it one more time just to make sure I have a
Okay.
grasp on it.
Is there a way in natural language compliance to scrub calls against the scheduled callback list? If I have someone on the callback list for tomorrow and their account comes up today, I don't want to call that account today since they are scheduled for tomorrow.
Yeah, so you can export your callback list, and what you can do then is you can import that list into what we call a scrub list. And those scrub lists can have expiration dates. And so you can have an expiration date on the callback to ensure that if the callback hasn't happened yet, you're not going to call that number to harass them. So you can export either via API or report, the scheduled callback, include the date, and then just import either via LMS or API or SFTP the list of callback entries. So they're not called until that date.
Okay, thank you very much, Chaz. Next question says, how does the TCN data get shared with other vendors? In other words, collection systems.
So TCN can send, there's lots of ways that data can be shared with collection systems. Typically TCN will send reports or can send reports via SFTP or pulled via API and to share all the call results. That's typically how you would share information to collection systems.
Okay. And let's see, there's another question that says, is there an option to extend the life of a campaign beyond the 24-hour expiration?
Say that one more time, Bryce. I'm sorry about that.
Is there an option to extend the life of a campaign beyond the 24-hour expiration?
So you can do 2 days currently, but beyond that, we don't have the abilities not to go past 2 days. What a lot of our clients will do is they'll send results and they'll send the results at the end of the day to an SFTP and include only what they'd like to have redialed. And then they would have an SFTP upload entry point in LMS that would then pick that file up and reschedule it automatically, only calling that which you want to redial. So to have a continuous campaign that goes on until it's completed or until you hit a certain amount of attempts, the best way to do that is to send results to an SFTP and only the call results that you want to call back or anything pending, and then TCN would then pick it up and reschedule it for the next day.
Okay, very good. And just in your experience, Chaz, in helping people get this tool up to speed and working with it, has there been any challenges with people understanding how to kind of work through LMS and the natural language compliance tool? Do you find it pretty easy for them to pick up very quickly?
Yeah, great question. This stuff all looks really complex, right? Like there's a lot of customization to it. What I found is all businesses want to remain compliant, but they want to maintain that efficiency. And so, but they haven't really dabbled in natural language or into LMS just because they think it's really complex. It's really, that being said, it is very intuitive and it is very easy to use once you start to play with it. And if you have any questions in setting it up, that's what we do as account managers is we're happy to help create these rules with you and fine tune them to give them the results that you're looking for.
See, another question just came in. Are rule sets applied universally, or do they have to be enabled in LMS as well?
So rule sets, great question. Rule sets can be enabled to the entire account and no LMS is needed there. So if we come into organization from operator, and then I go to preferences, and then to campaign and compliance, if I want just one rule set on my account all the time, don't want to have to worry about ever changing or forgetting to add a compliance rule set in, I can just tell the system not to display the different options, to use natural language compliance, and to select the rule set that I want to use indefinitely. As long as that's turned on and you hit save here at the bottom, that rule set will apply all the time, forever, and until you decide to turn it off or change the rule. So.
Okay, very good. And looks like we are to the end of the questions at the moment. Feel free to add any additional questions.